Hey there. Before we get into this one, which is a good long conversation with my friend Justin, I just wanted to say that we actually recorded this back in November 2025. So here it is, March, when I'm finally getting to release it. So there's a lot of things that we discussed that have ended up being already discussed on the site, like me getting into revolvers and things like that. So, hey, no surprises there. But still, it was a great conversation about Justin's new book, his philosophy around looking at what pistols. We got deep into the We Taught 1911 and training philosophies with law enforcement. So be sure to come by the website, everydaymarksman.co, but also check out Justin's website at Swift, Silent, Deadly. I won't hold you up anymore. Let's get to the interview. Welcome to the Everyday Marksman, where it's all about tactical skills for living a more adventurous life. As always, I'm your friend, Matt Robertson. Website's everydaymarksman.co. There you'll find our show notes, the email sign up, all of the latest articles, and the latest Postal Match Challenge. Come sign up. Today is a fun episode because I am back with my friend, one of the first people I ever interviewed, and then back years later, we've contacted over the years, my friend Justin from Swift, Silent, Deadly. Justin, welcome back.
Matt, thanks so much for having me on, man.
Oh, of course. We've been trying to do this one for months. I was going back to my emails, we were supposed to have an interview back in August. And then I got really sick and lost my voice for 2 weeks. And that kind of ruined that. And then between your job and my schedule, this has been our busy season. It's been rough to get the schedule. So we're here. We're going to get into it today.
Yeah. So, it's good to finally be here. And this is going to be an interesting topic.
Yeah. I think so. It's one that we've been circling around on back and forth. And I'm excited to get into it. So, but with that though, I think I'm going to start this one off talking about something related, but tangential, because you have a new book out. And you sent me a copy of it, Competent and Dangerous. And I read through it and I really liked it. I told you kind of in my notes, this is the most comprehensive cover every topic book that I would think is important that I've ever read. So well done on that. I know you put a lot into that one.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I sure did. Man, this has really been a passion project that's kind of been in the works for, really much, much longer than the writing, but I started writing this in September of 22 and just finished it up in October of 25. So just a hair over 3 years. And, this has been a huge, huge labor of love. 326,000 words. This thing is literally textbook size. Some people have been like, "Man, you're asking a lot for that book," and it's it's a huge book, and it's not double spaced, 14 point text. It's a big book, a lot of words, and a lot of my life and energy went into this. Even during the writing of this, there were several times I'm I really need read a couple more books on this before I feel comfortable talking about X, Y, or Z, or I need to go, take another class in this or get some more experience with that before I feel like this is a thing where I have enough credibility to speak about it. So it is all from a place of, kind of seasoned with experience and training and, education. And, I tell everybody it's the book I wanted when I was 16 and the book I wanted to write when I was 26. And now at almost 46, here it is.
Yeah. Well, it was just funny. The analogy I know you like to put in the book is what would James Bond do? So you have this idea of, being the all around capable person who has some skill at just about anything to get yourself out of that situation. And I really like that analogy. I think it's funny because it kind of ties back to my previous ideas where I was talking about the whole minimum capable citizen. And then I got into the martial arts stuff, but that's a different topic. I really like the analogy you're going with that. And I know we've talked back and forth about, how that's such a good ideal to go after. So I appreciated that. I'm going to eventually post up my kind of look over the whole book, but there's a particular section in there that I wanted to kind of focus in on. Now, you mentioned just now about kind of your background. So for, anybody who's listening to this, who's not aware, Justin's background is pretty vast. Let me tell me if I get this right, but going back, you had Marine Corps Special Operations, then you worked Northern Virginia area doing a lot of training, especially, I also did contracting overseas. Then you got to training, a lot of technical stuff. Then EMT school, and then later, law enforcement. And then I know you've also worked in and around things like natural disasters. I think we exchanged emails last year during the hurricanes and that hit North Carolina around the Asheville area, and kind of a lot of lessons learned out of that. So you have quite the background that kind of spans a lot of different things. And related to today's topic, which we're going to narrow in on the handgun question, I really enjoyed in your blog, Swiss Silent Deadly, how you go through and find a lot of these old evaluations, like old police evaluations, and you shoot it and post your results and kind of your thoughts on that. And I think that's a really cool background to go with. And I know we have shot together, and I was just like, yeah, you're really good at pistols. I was very mediocre. So that's going to get us today's topic is actually you have a chapter in there about firearm selection. And I read through it with great interest, and I was like, "Yep, this is exactly what you and I have talked about before." But the thing I want to start with is your REAP methodology, because I think this is a really good philosophy to go with, starting when you're giving somebody advice. Now, I'm going to set the stage for context for me on this one, and then we'll kind of go over to your ideas of it. But I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and revealing here's the things I do for fun on the side, because I don't typically talk about my other interests. He's asking, oh, so what should I buy? And I kind of said, like, you do this long enough, you shoot enough examples of things that either what I've bought or has been sent to me for review for like writing for American Rifleman and like other stuff, you get to a point where it's all kind of the same. There's only subtle little nuances, difference between things. So it's just your personal preference, with the most important thing being, is it reliable? Like, is it going to meet your needs? That's the R in a REAP. So I'm going to hand over to you and kind of explain REAP to me.
Well, so first of all, I can't take credit for that as my methodology. Mike Seeklander, and I think to some extent Rich Brown with the American Warrior Society developed that, and I altered it a little bit. So their initial acronym was reliability, ergonomics, accuracy, and power. And I decided that we could squeeze a little bit more utility out of this by just taking the power thing out. If you get a 9mm, you don't even have to worry about the power thing. I think caliber is really a secondary at best consideration. I'm a 9mm guy primarily because of cost of ammunition. I shoot quite a bit. If I carried a 45, I would have to shoot literally half as much for the same amount of money. And that's a pretty big, money is definitely a factor in my life. So that's certainly a consideration. So instead of power, I say portability there. Some guns are more portable than others. 1911s have that big sharp beaver tail sticking up that makes bending over kind of uncomfortable, but they also have some pros. Glocks there's some tangential factors to this as well, like aftermarket support. You may have some, about a year ago, I spent way too much money on a Smith & Wesson 3913 that was, basically in unused condition. I'm like, I'm going to get really good with this. And I found out pretty much immediately, almost no one makes a inside the waistband holster for it. It's would definitely be a candidate, but you have to get a custom made, you have to find someone who can make a holster. And I can't find anyone who will even consider making a Kydex holster for it. So, how portable is that gun really? It's very flat, very small, but that's a very real consideration. So this kind of the methodology. I got it from Mike and Rich, and I found it very useful to apply to everything. And to your point, everything is, pretty much the same. Most modern firearms are reliable. Most are more accurate than the people who own them. The ergonomic factors are kind of the squishier, like, does it, can you operate the controls on this well? And the portability is, another really subjective one that's going to kind of be up to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally hear you on the problem of, because I've been on this rabbit hole a couple of times where I buy something that I really like, and then I can't get support for it. Yeah, I mentioned this kind of off the air. I've got a selection in front of me because we're talking handguns today. So I'm going to start my first example here, because this is like, I would say this was my second purchase. And it was this one, Beretta 92A1, which I earlier this year sent off to Allegheny Arms, and they have done wonders with it. But very nice example of a Beretta. It has a lot of nice features on it, especially after modification. Like, I've had it dehorned, I got the front strap checkered, and it didn't come with all of that. It's got the rail, the trigger double actions running about 7 pounds, and the single actions like right around 3.5, and the reset is just ridiculous. But as much as I enjoy shooting it, ain't nobody makes holsters for this. This does not fit in a standard M9 holster or an M9A1, because I didn't know this. at the time, but like the slide is a Brigadier slide. It's a little wider than standard. And then it has a longer rail on the bottom with two slots, whereas M981 has one slot. It has a round trigger guard instead of a square. So like nobody supports this thing. So that my hopes and dreams for actually using this seriously kind of died pretty quick. But it's an example of like talking yourself into something that like, that looks really cool. And then you kind of get caught in a rut with it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I enjoy that challenge, as you know, and as longtime listeners probably know, I was very into revolvers, and part of being into revolvers is making them work. Not a lot, when I got into it 10 years ago, not a lot of people made holsters even for popular revolvers outside of like, cheap, it was hard to find high quality holsters. Now a bunch of people are bending Kydex for revolvers. Still, you can't find speed loaders. Like finding, very high quality speed loaders is extremely problematic. Part of me thinks I just enjoy that challenge. Like, let me make this as hard as I can make it and turn this, take chicken shit and make chicken salad out of it. But it's a Glock 19 world. If you go that route, you have every ounce of support the industry can muster behind you. Anything outside of that, and then it rapidly starts to kind of fade away.
Yeah, that was, I don't have it in front of me. That was my experience with like my third pistol, which was, I've talked about before, then FNS 9, which is, great pistol, but it had the same problem. Nobody ever supported it. And then FN retired it eventually in favor of the 509, which I had more success with. At that point, I'm just like, I've moved on.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we're going to come back to your writing here when it comes to kind of picking a pistol. You mentioned revolvers, and I'm going to come back to that topic because this is actually the newer thing for me. I'm probably going to start getting into it end of this year, beginning of next year, for a couple of reasons. But within this context of reliability, I think we kind of have a good sense of what does reliable mean. Like it's you take care of it, you maintain it, it functions, it feeds everything you give it, at least high quality stuff, and it doesn't fail you. And good magazines, I think, goes with that too. But I do want to touch on this idea of accuracy because you've run a lot of good experimental drills. I kind of have my philosophy of but for you, what is a good accuracy expectation, like, or a standard you would aim for?
Oh man, that's such a great question. Boy, I honestly, it's hard to say this is my standard. This size target at this distance is my standard. I think generally, with just about anything, I would want to be able to hold shots into the down zero zone of an IDPA target, which is an 8-inch circle, essentially, a paper plate if you don't want to buy targets at 25 yards. I think that would be a worthwhile standard. And things like all the way down to like the Kel-Tec 32, I've been able to do that. And I can't shoot that as quickly as I can shoot my Glock 45 that I go to work with, but I feel a pretty reasonable standard. And accuracy, almost anything from the factory will be inherently more accurate than you can be with it. As you know, I carry a custom 1911 in my personal life that is, I think it's guaranteed like 1 inch at 25 yards or something. I've never shot 1 inch at 25 yards. I'm just not organically capable of that. The gun is, and I'm, the accuracy that I'm capable of with the gun is pretty good, but that's not really a meaningful measure for me. It really doesn't matter as long as I can meet my standard. And some guns have the mechanical accuracy, but I'm unable to get that out of them. And one, awesome example is the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 2.0. It's bigger than a Kel-Tec P32. It should be far more shootable. It's striker fired rather than that, pseudo double action trigger of the Kel-Tec. And I mention these together because they both functionally serve kind of the same niche. And they're both very small and shouldn't, quote unquote, shouldn't be very accurate. But the Bodyguard 2.0 came with sights that were so big, so wide. I was dropping shots into the down 3 zone of an IDPA silhouette at 25 yards, which is just absolutely unacceptable. But, kind of by my standards. So the gun is capable of it, but I'm not capable of getting that accuracy out of the gun. So it's most guns are more accurate than you're going to be. It's what you're able to get out of that gun. J-frame revolvers, another awesome example. You put them in expert hands and they can do amazing things. People can hit steel at 100 yards with a J-frame. In inexpert hands, they're hard to shoot well. They're hard to be very accurate with.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on the idea of the 8-inch circles. I think it's just a good all around do that. Now, technically, I think I actually do write that more of a 10-inch circle because that's the depth from sternum to spine of the average human viewed from the side. But I think 8 inches is a better target to kind of go with, just because it's like, roughly, that's 4 MOA at this distance if you're using a rifle, or like it's just easy to imagine thing. And then my stance is your goal should be with any platform, pistol, shotgun, rifle, PCC, you name it, it would be to an 8-inch circle at X distance. And then you pick the appropriate tool for you to be able to execute that with the distance that you need to hit. And that's going to be different.
Ooh,
for
I like
everybody.
that. Yeah.
Because one of my frustrations, especially kind of in the firearms niche area, is this idea of everybody wants maximum accuracy when they can't do it, or they'll never have the opportunity to worry about it. Like, deviating from handguns a little bit, will you like use rifles? The people who want super accurate, like 3/4 MOA rifles so they can shoot the nuts off a gnat at 200 yards. And they'll never actually shoot at a distance where that matters to them. Like, there's nothing you're going to shoot at that's small enough to worry about, because like you live in Northern Virginia and your longest sight line is 150 yards in any direction. Or they can't do it and they're not going to shoot ammo capable. They'll buy like a super accurate $4,000 custom rifle and feed it bulk 147 grain. Like, well, why?
Yeah. Or buy a $4,000 rifle and throw $1,000 piece of glass on it. And you're not going to get capability rifle.
That's going to burn a couple of burn. They're like, $1,000 sounds like a lot of glass, but when you're dealing with $4,000 rifles,
and it is, but when you're trying to get those, eke out that extra, Pareto's principle, that extra 20%, those things probably start to matter a little bit more.
Yeah. Now, but I think when it comes to handguns, I think the 8-inch target is good. And I like your analogy here of kind of, there's not necessarily a time standard, but I think this does feed into the ergonomics issue of how well are you able to handle it? Because like you said, like a small one that you don't practice with that much is going to be way hard to do that with in a reasonable time versus one that you can, like, here, I'll pull up my actual regular one. So CZ, PCR. This does have that beaver tail, which I totally get what you're saying about that. I can dig in. But these things point so well. Like, it clears the holster and I go out and its sights are on target. Like, it's just an instinctual, it's there. And like that first shot is just right where I want it, like every time. Am I good about doing it 5 more times in a short amount of time? No, that's something I'm working on. But I think there's a lot to be said for that kind of ergonomic connection of it points where I want very quickly.
Yeah. That's a thing. That's certainly a thing that I struggle with. That I'm not a big Glock fan. Working at my agency, on uniform duty, I have to carry a Glock, and there's a big difference between a 1911 grip angle and a Glock grip angle. Numerically, it's not very big, 22 degrees versus 18 degrees or something like that. Practically, it's a pretty significant difference. So every morning when I go on duty, or before I check on, I try to set aside 10 minutes to dry practice before I load my gun back up and check on duty, get in the car, just because there's such a drastic difference between my 1911 and where my hand, through a couple decades of shooting 1911s, is trained to orient that gun to get it on the correct sight line. And I'm becoming more flexible as I, work between those two platforms. It's not insurmountable. But I'm definitely capable of greater accuracy with the 1911, partially just through experience, and maybe to some extent, some people's anatomy is optimized for one or the other. I'm not saying one is right, one is wrong. They're both fine. Even if you're predisposed to liking one, if you shoot enough with the other, you'll be fine. It's not some insurmountable thing. But if I had to bet my life on one shot from one handgun being delivered accurately, it would be with a 1911, and not because 1911s are more accurate, more inherently accurate, but because of, just my training and experience. And I'm probably more likely to draw an 1811 and present it at an angle that promotes good accuracy.
We're going to come back to 1911s in a bit, because this is like the big topic today. But I want to pull a couple more threads here and kind of discuss. So in your book, you kind of talk about action types, and I agree with everything you're saying about striker fire versus double action, single action, and then single action only. And striker fire kind of tends to be the easy suggestion because of that. It's the same trigger pull every time. There's not a lot of fussing with it. I totally get that. I'm curious about your take on the double action, single action, because that actually is my preference. But I'm gonna lay out my theory first. Is that I feel like double action, single action is that thing that always is out there in the background that people don't appreciate until they get to the point where they can appreciate it.
Agreed. I think the easy button solution is to say, go get a Glock 19, or I think my recommendation, it tends to be more Glock 48. If someone's like, what gun should I buy? Don't tell me any more information. Go get a Glock 48 or a Glock 19. All the aftermarket support in the world is available to you. They're very easy guns to shoot. They're very easy to understand and manipulate. There's not a lot of complexity or opacity in the operation of them. They're pretty straightforward. Ironically, about one day after the book was actually published and on the shelf, I listened to a podcast with Simon Golub, who is the instructor, trained with him last summer, taught probably the best pistol class I've ever been to. And I think within about 15 minutes, he had me sold on double action guns. He's like, I don't know that it's a great idea to put, guns with these very short, light triggers in the hands of novices. There is certainly something to be said for double action guns as far as just a greater safety margin. You have a longer, heavier initial trigger pull. I would never holster a 1911, the 1911 that I carry every day, without ensuring that the thumb safety is engaged, because it has very, very short travel and a very light trigger. And that's by design. So that safety is there to build that additional margin in. But with a double action revolver or double action, single action pistol with a 10-pound trigger, 8-pound trigger, and quite a bit of travel to make that gun fire, you got a pretty big safety margin in there. And your ability to pin the hammer as you holster the gun. Oh, yeah. There's a big safety margin built in there. And, I used to, I grew up reading the gun magazines and, like everybody else of a certain age. And there was always you're going to, you can't master the one trigger pull and the other, different trigger pulls, blah, blah, blah. This is a solution for a problem that, doesn't exist. Answer to a question nobody's asking. It's not really that difficult to master. And no. Now there are quite a few serious competitors running DASA guns that just, make the rest of us look stupid with our, single action race guns and whatever. It can be done. It's just a matter of your willingness to do it.
100%. And I think it's I think it was, I quoted Ernest Langdon to kind of introduce me to the idea of like, I bred it again here, but like, it's just kind of, you just have to learn how to do it. Once you do it, it's just the fundamentals. It's just, I talked to one instructor from Green Ops, and he was saying like pistol shooting is not that different from rifles. It's just less forgiving. And a double action, dealing with double check here because it's been sitting around or clear. But a double action, it's just a smooth to the rear. But the problem is you just have to learn how to not disturb everything else and do that, I think, smoothly. Is where people go wrong. I know you've been a revolver shooter, and that's a big part of learning to shoot revolvers well.
And if you can learn to master a double action trigger, everything else in the world is going to be easy, just markedly easier for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I do really, that is one of the things especially because I tend to carry appendix, I do very much appreciate that hammer, that when you go to reholster, that you put your thumb on there, and if anything starts moving it, you feel that move. And it's also a lot of resistance, and I forgot what instructor it was who was talking about what you're saying with the double action, that because that first shot, it just gives you that much more gap between the oh crap and it actually goes off that maybe I didn't mean to pull it. Like I was stressed and I just put my finger on there a little too quickly, and then I'll let back on it for now. But I don't know. That's kind of I've never actually had to do that for real, and hopefully never will. So it's just kind of, but it made sense to me.
And I didn't mention this in the book, but with I wanted the book to be a little bit more evergreen, but with the thing that's going on with SIG right now, and I think there was another publicized, quote unquote uncommanded discharge. I don't know what's going on. I don't pretend to have any inside information there. But it's certainly the appearance that a gun went off in a holster. The awesome thing about a double action gun is that the hammer that powers the firing pin is completely at rest. It's not tensioned at all. It has to be fully tensioned and then released. So, sometimes I carry Cocked and Locked 1911, and I was having this conversation with Mike Seeklander recently. Once in a while, you get a little paranoid when you're, on an 8-hour car ride with this thing, in the appendix position. Like, man, what if that hammer released? What if that hammer, and it's not going to. It's, that's such it would fall to half cock. Like, it's such a, outlier scenario, but, especially this SIG thing is, definitely, I don't know, more cognizant of it. Again, not a thing that you need to worry about, but,
yeah. And
big benefit to a DA
funny.
gun.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Now I will point out with 1911s, so I'm going to pick up one of mine. So my operator, one of the things I learned as I was digging through the guts of this thing, and I swapped out the safety lever with the AMPI EGW one, was I didn't realize that when you're actually fitting the safeties on these things, that the safety is mashed up against the sear. The sear will not move. Like, it is pressed up against there, and it is not moving when that safety is engaged. That was a nice little kind of confidence booster that I didn't realize was the case with 1911s before. So,
yeah. Anyway. And, well, I'll save the 1911 stuff for later.
Yeah. We're gonna get to that one. Okay. So we've covered kind of the striker election. I'm going to actually go into the 1911 stuff now, because you point out that you don't think 1911s are really good first, and you say as someone who carries one, but I don't have the exact. Go back up and find the quote here. There we go. You have put it under your non-recommended, and then said the most significant knocking is it's can be a picky eater. So this picks on the reliability aspect to it. Number one, I think, is probably the big takeaway there. But what other reasons do you think 1911 is not really a good first suggestion?
So the finicky reliability, like the 1911 is a reliable platform. There's a reputation that they're unreliable, and that's not true. Like, the military did extensive testing on us, stayed with them until the mid 80s. They're incredibly reliable guns, or they certainly can be. That gets altered a little bit when we change a couple things. When the size of the gun gets smaller, we alter the dimensions that it was optimized for, and that can impact reliability negatively. The other thing is 9mm, going down to 9mm. It was designed around the 45 ACP cartridge. 9mm is shorter, so feeding becomes a little trickier, and far more 1911s now are made in 9mm than 45. I think we've kind of conquered that, but that always still, kind of looms in my imagination. And it's part of the reason 7 or 8 years ago, however long, I bought a custom 1911 for carry, just to give myself the biggest margin for, the best potential for reliability in a 9mm 1911 out there. And I use good magazines. I use good ammo, good quality ammo. I keep my gun clean and lubricated and all that. Just why I don't think this is a great initial handgun. And to be clear, I'm not saying it's not good for anyone. I don't think it's a good first handgun, because there's quite a bit to the manual of arms. It's a little bit more complex. I think there's some pros, but there's also certainly some cons. And I see this a lot with shooters. I just I was an assistant instructor in a firearms course last week. And, seeing a couple of people run single action guns that, on target, off safe, off target, on safe, like just that, I'm sure that sound is going to be horrible in the podcast. Just that subconscious competence at taking the gun off safe as you present out toward the target and reapplying the safety as you come back is, I think, really difficult for new shooters who are task saturated on a million other things to really get down. And this is, we are talking about about a 3, maybe a 3.5 pound trigger with, I don't know, maybe an eighth of an inch of travel once you hit the wall. It is a very, very light, crisp trigger. There's not a lot of margin for error. And, I also saw that in this class where we had shooters ranging from very experienced, this is their 10th course, to shooters who this is their first course that they've attended, people coming back into the ready position with a finger on the trigger. And this is not going to be forgiving of that at all. Also, I think just cost wise, I'm looking at this, from the book's perspective. handing this book to a 21-year-old, like, hey man, here's how you get your hands around your life, get some skills, get some whatever. And if you're going to initially take up self-defense, the lower you go on the price spectrum, I think the greater your chances of getting an unreliable specimen are in the 1911 market. Doesn't mean you have to spend $4,000 on Ed Brown, but you're also probably not going to get the same reliability that we get out of I don't know what a Glock goes for. I keep wanting to say a $400 Glock, but that was 25 years ago. A $600 Glock or whatever, you're not going to get the same reliability out of a $600 1911. And I would argue that, really to get into a halfway decent 1911, maybe $1,000, $1,200. So it cost us a lot more. There's not the holster options. There are a lot of holster options, but just not the holster options there are for other guns. Magazines are a whole nother thing, because the 1911 is not a gun. It is a pattern. Everybody and their mother makes one. And, Alchemy Customs, like, don't use Wilson Combat mags with their guns because they don't, I don't know why, but, it's just a much more fractured and splintered market. And a 1911, a Glock is a Glock. A 1911 is not a 1911. It is SIG's or Smith & Wesson's or Nighthawk's or Taurus's take on a 1911.
Yeah. And I think I see these conversations pop up. It's like, oh, I want to get my first pistol. I should get a 1911. They're so cool. And I don't disagree that they're so cool, but I go back to my experience, because my first pistol that I purchased was a 1911, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And like, looking backwards, if I was giving that advice to myself. Is that? Mine was a Beretta. See, I think that's a better choice. but so mine was actually this one, though it did not look like this when I got it. But the thing I immediately ran into was I didn't know anything about running it. I didn't realize that, like, in 1911, it's more than 100-year-old design. Parts had to be fitted, and the springs are set up in a way that you got to replace them fairly frequently, relative to a Glock or an HK, which will go 20, 30,000 rounds. Like, whatever, like, that's fine. Drop some lube on it, you're good. And 1911 just doesn't operate that way. So I was kind of like, I didn't know that going into it. And I think in hindsight, I'm like, that's cool. Do you understand that? But for 21-year-old, 22-year-old me, that was different. That was a different ballpark. Like, I wasn't quite ready to jump into that kind of commitment, I guess, of being aware of maintenance and then being, here's the nuances of it. And it was a picky eater until I got it worked on. But that said, I am going to keep going down this 1911 rabbit hole, because you're an enthusiast for it. I had become after ignoring mine for 18 years until I got it, kind of came back and then bought a second one. I'm probably going to buy a third one at a smaller commander size. So become a big enthusiast for it. I'm curious your take, because you were Marine Corps Special Operations and were issued, the so-called MUSOC, and shot it and went through all those evolutions. And I know, other special operations units, particularly I believe it was Delta, they were big 1911 guys. You hear guys like Pat Mack talk about it. Mm-hmm. What is it about 1911s in the era? I know it's not the case anymore, but in the era where everybody else was switching to 9mm and Berettas and Glocks, certain units were like, we're sticking to 1911 and 45. What was it about that, do you think?
I don't know that it was anything incredibly logical, right? Because it's much greater logistical tail. You can't have 1911 armors. You have to have 1911 gunsmiths to work on these guns. They're not drop-in parts. They're fitted parts, as you alluded to. You had different ammo. So Delta and Marine Force Recon were using 45 ACP 1911s, which paradoxically, just the weirdest thing in the world, is a 45 1911 and a 9mm MP5, which what sense does that make? So really, I don't know. I think, and MARSOC, when they wrote their proposal for the CQB pistol, the M45 CQB pistol, it was basically written in such a way that nothing but a 1911 was going to fill that void. And I'm like, guys, why aren't we doing a Glock 21 if you want to stick with 45 or Glock 17? It just doesn't make sense to me for a big organization, because the maintenance is is ponderous, like the logistical tail, keep 1911s running in the hands of, 100 operators or 200 or however many you got in your organization. I don't even want to think about what that takes in, people, filing away a little piece of this, a little piece of that to make stuff fit. Like it must be, to make it, tight enough that doesn't rattle around and it's actually reliable and it meets their accuracy standards and all this. I don't even want to begin to think about what goes into that versus, let's just buy 600 Glocks and be done with it. Maybe it was the cool factor. Maybe it was the, I want to say the quote unquote stopping power thing, which we know is kind of a myth, right? Coroners all over the country will tell you, like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what round he got hit with, what caliber it was, just that it was a handgun. It was, I don't know, 9mm, 40, 45. I don't know. They all do about the same thing. But the intellectual dishonesty of saying we need a 45 because it's more powerful, but we're going to carry a 9mm, essentially a rifle, just makes no sense to me. I don't know. Maybe it's I honestly don't know why the Marine Corps stuck with it. But I don't really care. I got to I on one hand, I want to say I got to use it. And on the other hand, I want to say I had to, because it created this, this really deep training scar. If they would have handed me a Glock 17, I'd probably be the biggest Glock fanboy in the world today. And things would be way cheaper. I would have way more options available to me. I could, you can get a Glock any way you want it. You can have, there's 2,500 people out there that will machine this or that into your slide or whatever, for a pittance of what a custom 1911 will cost. So I really don't know what the impetus was to stick with that, especially with the very limited capacity of, you look at a unit like Delta, I don't know this for sure, but are probably using good quality expanding ammunition, probably not limited to full metal jacket. A double stack 9mm just makes so much more sense to me in a context where you're, maybe a lone operator or maybe a couple of guys and all you have is pistols. I probably would prefer more rounds to less. In the civilian world, that's not my use case. That's not my risk factor, my threat level. So yeah, an 8+1 gun is fine for me. I don't know, as a military guy in a foreign country, alone and unafraid with long hair on some secret thing, that I would want a 7+1 gun. I don't know. I don't know why they stuck with it as long as they did.
I certainly think there's probably that cachet to it, like the cool factor of like, hey, we get to be different and it's a classic. And they do look cool. That's a big part of it. And you mentioned
never
the
underestimate
question.
Never underestimate the value of being different. Our SWAT team is pretty good. We don't get paid anything more to be on the team. And I was talking to the training officer. He's like, man, what could we do to get people interested? Because we got no one at the last tryout. And I'm like, let people on the team carry whatever gun they want, or like make a list of like, you can carry these cool guy guns. That would get people to come over here. If no one else can do that, but they can, like that's, believe me, carrying, like when you carried a 1911, you wanted everybody to see your cocked and locked 1911.
Yeah, there's just something to it.
Yeah.
You brought up the stopping power thing. So I did a refresh one of my articles about this recently. And, it's funny how much this is still like a big thing. And, you go through like 1911 forums specifically, and I have to remind myself how many of these guys are probably in their 70s and 80s. And they've been spouting the same points for decades, even though that's just not what the current research shows. Like, it's just what they're comfortable with. At the same time, there's enough of these like old stories. Like I saw an interview, I think it was a Sean Ryan show, and this guy was Vietnam vet, and he was talking about like he carried a lot of stuff. He was on SOG, or whatever was it? I forgot when I'm
MacV
on the actual MacV SOG, yeah. And he was like comparing, because he carried everything from like revolvers to a 9mm, a high power, to a 1911. And he was like, the only thing that was guaranteed that like if I shot him, most of the time that ended it was a 1911. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I sometimes you could write that off to shot placement. There's just better shot. So that was more effective. And then like sometimes you're like, but these guys probably were good with everything. So is there potentially something there? And we're just like we're just ignoring it? Because I know the FBI is like the authority today on wounding ballistics, but are they just kind of just ignoring it? I have a theory about that. I'll come back to in a second, but I'll get your take on that.
I've treated gunshot wounds. Handguns just don't have rifles are in a completely different class. Rifles do just incredibly destructive damage to the human body. Handguns basically drill holes, and I've seen people shot with 380 up to 45, and I don't see, actually 22 up to 45. I don't see a whole lot of difference. I think if you hit a vital, the heart, the ascending aorta, the spine, the brain, you're going to have good effect. And if you don't, you may have good effect or you may not. It's largely just leaving it to the opinion of whoever you've shot. If they, if you hit them in a critical area where they cannot continue to function, the heart, the great vessels, the central nervous system, then you're going to stop the fight. It's not not up to them now. If you hit them somewhere else, then they still get a vote as long as they continue to function. And a long shot is, we talk about that 8-inch circle, and that's pretty good. But a long shot is not going to necessarily put someone down in an instant. It may take, they may eventually, their lung fills up with blood, but that may take a half an hour. They very well may avenge their own death in that time. Or they, I've seen people shot. I've seen people survive, multiple rounds that would certainly kill you or I. Like if I shot myself in the toe, I would get sepsis and die from it. These people are still alive. And I don't know how, but.
Yeah. And I know Greg Ellerfritz has talked about this too. He did like all the big posts about, the results of calibers, and it was kind of a wash. We talked about the big ones. So my working theory, though, and I'm going to relate this back to my background because I'm not a door-kicking trigger puller, but I was a nuclear weapons guy. So the risk of engineering nerding out for a second. When you detonate a nuclear weapon, one of the big effects everybody knows about is infrared. Like it lights things on fire. And that was like a big deal when we did use them in anger. But the interesting thing about infrared, so we know that's an effect that like when you split atoms and they emit these X-rays, the X-rays slam into the atmosphere and creates this massive infrared wave that just heats everything up like a miniature sun. The problem is that it's inconsistent. It's that a lot depends on the weather conditions. If it's high moisture vapor because it's foggy, well, water absorbs a ton of infrared heat. So if you're going to use a nuclear weapon, you should not count on the infrared as your main destruction event because you can't guarantee it's actually going to do what you want it to do. So it's a bonus. It's a bonus thing that's there, but you don't count on that. You count on the blast wave and the pressure wave and all those effects, which are guaranteed to happen because that's also the thing. So I kind of come back to the ballistic conversation of, I think the most important thing, I think we agree on this, is you have to hit something important, which means you have to penetrate and you have to hit it. And that either means you sever, cut, crush, whatever is like super important, like nerves, or you drain enough blood out of the system that just lights out. Otherwise you have to punch enough holes to make that happen faster. And then the stopping power potentially is there. That whole kinetic energy transfer mechanism we talk about of like, I'm firing something that's got 200 foot-pound more energy and your body's still absorbing that. It's like blunt trauma. Okay. Some people take a punch better than others. Like, how you guarantee that's going to do its job is kind of my thinking. So I'm kind of like this sense of it's probably a thing, but you can't count on it. Like, don't rely on that to be the reason you choose it. Like, that's a bonus effect once everything else is in order. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Right. Energy dump has never really made sense to me. Because a shotgun, when you shoot a shotgun, it dumps the same amount of energy to the shooter. There's an equal and opposite reaction. It's spread over a larger surface area, which is why it's not deadly to the shooter. But energy dump, until we get into where it's actually tearing, and generally I think around 2,000 feet per second, where that's accepted to happen, it creates enough stretch that like actual tearing occurs. Our tissues are really elastic. Like poke your fingers into your belly and your tissue is very elastic without tearing. The concept of energy dump is kind of lost on me, to be honest. I need the energy to propel that bullet into a critical structure, do damage to either the central nervous system or hit enough vessels or create some sort of mobility kill. That's also, may or may not be satisfactory depending on, my ability to move and things like that. But yeah, those are the things you can depend on versus the things that are, like you said, like maybes, nice to haves. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pick something else interesting. So you mentioned the 9mm. So you mentioned that 1911s were built around the 45 ACP, which have a certain overall length on the cartridge. And only recently did I discover 38 Super. Yeah, you're laughing because I see the videos. I think the 1911 syndicate joked about this of like 1911 should be 9mm or 45. The 38 Super guys are weird. But when I think about it, I'm like, that makes so much sense. Like it's a 9mm size bullet loaded on a cartridge length to make it the same length as 45 ACP for more reliable feeding, and you get more powder behind it. Where I run into the challenge now is, okay, that all sounds good in theory, setting aside ammo availability and all of that. But what we're just talking about, is that extra energy actually useful or not? Or are you now selecting a more rare cartridge that's harder to find that doesn't actually offer you anything over what you can already do? Something that's been on my mind lately.
Right. Man, I love sitting around thinking about 9x23, 9x21, 38 Super, like all the, and 10mm. 10mm is also 45 ACP length. And I am still kind of a 10mm nerd. I think the cartridge is super neat. I love the story behind it. I love shooting 10mm. But a case of 9mm right now is $225. And I go through that almost every month. A case of 45 is $450. Case of 10mm up there, 357 SIG, also super, super neat. Is that energy necessary? I don't know. It's neat. It's bottleneck, so it's more reliable. Like, I don't know how much more reliable you can get than my 1911, but theoretically that would do it. It's neat. No argument here, but the most practical thing in all this always boils back down to, what can I shoot the most? What can I practice the most with? And you start talking 10 cases of ammo a year, 10, 12 cases of ammo a year, $200 more a case. That's a couple grand more. That's a class and, lodging and food for, for a weekend. That's a lot of money.
And it goes back to the most important thing being well practiced, so you can accurately place hits where they need to be in a reasonable amount of time. And that's what's most important. So buy whatever's going to help you do that. That's still effective.
And that's over 1 year. I'm in, I don't know, year 8 of carrying this now, and I'm right at 16,000 rounds on this gun. So 16 cases of ammo times 200, that's $3,200, right? Like it's a lot of, people talk about how expensive the gun is. The gun's really not that expensive. Like, over the fullness of time that I'm going to own this, the amount of ammo I'm going to put through it is going to, pay for this gun 10 times over.
That's such a good point. Now, all right, I'm going to go to another conversation here that we've had in the past. I think of several months ago, maybe early summer, you put up a post and we're sort of going down the rabbit hole of like your ideal, like, was it fighting 1911? Or what were you looking for? And if I remember the specs, you wanted something steel frame, 9mm, optics ready, and with or without a light rail. I couldn't remember. I think it was with.
I just had this open. Yeah, I do. So, I got it up. So 9mm commander length. And I could even flex and do a full length, but I like a commander, especially 9mm, just moving less slide mass, and it's a little more versatile, I think, for concealed carry to duty carry. Steel light rail frame, checkered front strap, optic system, front cocking serrations, ambi safety, magazine well, and that's it. And almost all those things you could buy any 1911 have done, but if you got to put front cocking serrations and a checkered front strap on the gun after you've bought it, you're also going to have to refinish the whole gun, which is going to double the cost of both of those modifications. It's just it's a huge pain. And and you were among several people who were like, man, as I was reading through, I was like, I'm gonna gotcha with this, with this model,
No,
and it just doesn't
there
exist.
wasn't
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
The closest, I think the closest we found was the SIG 1911X, but they don't do it in 9.
They only make it in 45.
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the Springfield TRP is really close, but the Commander one is only an aluminum frame.
Yep. Man,
same with the operator.
Yeah. Oh, and that's, I ran into it. Like I said, like for me, close, like this is my operator.
Yeah.
9mm. I put tape on the front. I will get it checkered eventually, but my other ones, this is my original. This one's 45, but I did have them checker the front, and it's super nice. And it had the whole thing refinished. But yeah, like what you're looking for, it does not exist, but I'm in the market now too for a commander size. But I'm going to get to the question of 9, because, this debate comes up every once in a while within the marksman community, especially when I started really getting into this rabbit hole, is, in a world where the 2011, the double stack has gotten so popular, why a single stack 9? Why stick with that?
I'm all about the double stack. So I have a Wilson Combat SFX 9 that I want to love. I bought it right on the cusp of switching to optics, and I got a non-optic ready one, which I deeply regret, but that's going to get fixed, and hopefully I'll get into that gun. I like double stack. Double stack is awesome, but for carry, just the thinness of this, there are not a lot of, handguns out there that are as thin as a 1911. And I don't have huge hands. That's a big factor. I'm probably a small medium, for putting hands on a 5-point scale. I just the fit, really, it's the fit. And the comfort of carry. I've tried to carry double stack guns, like a P365 XL is about as big as I can get before it's uncomfortable for me. I'm not a huge guy. I'm not super small, especially around the waist anymore. I was always known for being a super skinny guy until I hit like my mid 30s. But I just don't have a lot of tolerance for discomfort for carrying a gun that just consumes too much space. It becomes really uncomfortable for me, and I'm just like, I just don't have the tolerance to carry that if it's not comfortable. So I think this strikes the balance of excellent fit in my hand and excellent fit in my waistband, which for me, and this is deeply personal, this is not anywhere approaching a universal recommendation. This is finding the exact thing that works for me.
Mm-hmm. So I totally agree. The slimness is a big factor on that one. And I'm curious about why stick with steel though. So like if we're going to go something that's easy to carry, it's still slim, but then there's the weight factors. I'm thinking like commander size steel frames are in like 30, 37?
Okay.
33 ounces?
I'm tracking with what you're saying. So this is a carry gun. This is an aluminum frame gun. I don't remember the weight off the top of my head. Way lighter than a steel frame gun. So my that article was for a duty 1911.
Okay. Okay. For a carry gun, we're going different.
Yeah. I want the steel frame. I want the. I put quite a few rounds on a gun. I want a steel frame that's going to last forever. And I want the the extra recoil mitigation of a true steel frame 1911 with a flashlight on it. Compared to shooting, this is the only gun I've really shot appreciably in classes and things like that, other than reviewing guns for several years now, until I got into law enforcement and they handed me a Glock 45 and I'm like, oh, this is why everybody actually shoots a big gun and carries a small gun. It's way easier to shoot a big gun. This is the only thing I've known for years. But now I'm like, I kind of want a, big heavy 1911 to shoot all the time. Cause it makes me look better. Right.
True. All right. So I'm going to pick one more pick on this thread question here, because I know one of the things that come up, and I'm given the way things have gone in Virginia lately in the last round of elections, I know we're all staring down the barrel of probably some magazine limits in the future, which then calls into question some practicality things of like, if I take my CZ, yes, I know I can go get 10 round magazines for it, but if I'm limited to 10, is there an argument in your mind is saying, all right, well, if you're limited to 10, then take the biggest 10 rounds you can fit as long as you can shoot it well. So go for a commander size 1911 with 45.
45 or 19 or 9mm. I think you still get one extra round with 9mm.
Yeah.
And,
or two.
Or two. Yeah. Or two. I would, that was a big, I think a big shift back to 45 in the 90s with the assault weapons ban. Mm-hmm. It's like, if I can only have 10 rounds, might as well be 45 ACP. Sure, if you can only, I would say have the gun that you will shoot the most and can shoot the most accurately, regardless of what the specifics of the chambering are. I think I sound like a broken record. I can't get past the financials of shooting 45. Mm-hmm. I just can't afford to do it and shoot the amount that I want and maintain the level of skill that I want.
Yeah,
if I could, like, if I had way more money or my organization were paying for ammo, you can be awesome with anything. You can, 40 Smith & Wesson is a great cartridge. 45 ACP is a great cartridge, and you can be amazing with those. Your splits might be, a tenth of a second slower, which, probably for a highly competent shooter, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but who cares? Like, is that a unit of measure that matters in any way on the, in a defensive situation? Probably not.
Yeah.
I just don't have the money to make that happen.
Oh yeah. The financial factor, especially if you're not into reloading, which I'm going to come to that topic in a second, but, that would make a difference, I think. But, you just said something I think is an interesting kind of tangent, which is this tendency of a lot of enthusiasts to kind of confuse competition-oriented statistics like split times or reload times with, is that actually useful? And the example I'll give, and you have a lot more experience with this than I do, is that I remember, reading gun boards and message boards and social media, and everybody was trying to show how fast the reload time was. How quickly could you dump a mag from your AR and put a fresh mag in and go? The first time I ever went to an actual training event where it was like small unit tactics and like on a jungle lane, that did not matter. Yeah. It did not matter. Like you took cover, your battle buddy kept shooting, you said you were loading, and you fetched out your mag, you fed it, and you got back, but did not need to be a half second. Like it did not matter. So I don't know.
And especially with an AR, like in 30 rounds, you should be probably, except in some super extenuating circumstance, within 30 rounds, you should probably be making an opportunity to reload at what is the most opportune time for you, instead of just running the gun completely dry. And then, and I get it on break contact drills and stuff like that. It's easy to, just dump a mag real quick, but, in some sort of, it's hard to imagine a civilian situation where you're going to go through more than 30 rounds. But if you do, probably at some point you should be kind of thinking about, let me reload at my convenience and not when I'm forced to because I'm at bullet lock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the same apply to pistols. You said something earlier about, in day-to-day civilian life, you're totally comfortable with an 8+1 or 9+1. And I do think while there is certainly an argument of nobody ever says they're mad they had too much ammo, that there's a practicality question sometimes, like if you're trying to deal with the ergonomics and the form factor of things.
Yeah. And, I think the less capacity you have, the greater likelihood of needing a reload is, which kind of drives me a little bit nuts about revolver world. People are like, oh, I carry 5-round gun, I don't carry reload because no civilians ever had to do a reload, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, is it because no one's ever had to, or because no one's actually carrying a reload, mentally prepared to do it and training for it? I'm not sure maybe we should look at the reasons behind that. But yeah, carrying a 9-round gun, 8+1 gun, I do carry reload. I feel like that's, kind of on the edge of where I'm comfortable. If you carry a Glock 17 with, 17+1 in your gun, your odds of getting a reload are vanishingly small. Understand the potential for magazine failure. Sure, that could happen. If you want to carry a reload. I'm not telling you not to. If you don't want to, hey man, you do you. Like, I mean, really, we're all probably going to be fine. people get so wrapped. I think I'm going to sidetrack. I think there's a big tendency in the gun community to think everybody needs to do exactly what I do. I have a friend who's adamantly against night sights. I'm like, how does it hurt you in the slightest if I have night sights on my gun? But he's like a crusader against night sights. And it's like, hey man, just don't put them on your gun. Your gun is the only gun that should matter to you. Yeah, man, if you want to carry, if you're not comfortable at any +1 gun, carry something bigger, man. I'm not telling you you're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
So you mentioned revolvers. I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to this topic. So a very first conversation we ever had actually was about revolvers. And I'll admit it, like I shot yours. I still remember I was like, I'm going to go get a King Cobra because I liked yours. And then you showed me off. You got a Python and everything. I'm like this close to now go and get a GP 100 match champion, which I believe you reviewed on your prior website. So I'm that close, but I'm also going to pair that with reloading. I want to get into how do I reload 357, 38, and then maybe branch out into doing 45. What am I in for?
I'll be honest, right now, there are massive QC problems across the revolver industry. It's endemic. Ruger's having big problems. Smith & Wesson is the king of revolver problems right now. I think Smith & Wesson's going to have some big existential questions to answer in revolver world if they don't solve some of these problems. The move to Maryville, Tennessee from New England, I think they lost a lot of institutional talent who chose to stay in Massachusetts or retired or whatever concurrent with the move. But Smith & Wesson is kind of a dumpster fire right now. Colt is having problems, and I don't know that Colt is... I don't know the reasons behind these things, but there are a ton of guns going back, a ton of people, I think they're kind of relying on this person's going to buy it, shoot 50 rounds through it, and it's going to sit in a safe for until the end of time. I just wrote an article about 2 absolutely abysmal Smith & Wesson guns that had completely unacceptable problems for a revolver guy. And these are the ultimate carry guns that are they're kind of top of the line J-firm revolvers. That's a big problem, is getting a good sample. I would, I tell everyone, if you buy a revolver now, be prepared to send it back. It's everybody's looking at these as almost as unfinished parts kits that you should be prepared to spend more money on just getting the gun to a functional gun. And then, worry about whatever additional aftermarket add-ons or modifications or whatever you want to make. But your odds of getting a functional gun out of the box are pretty low right now. Ruger, Andrew Gore left Smith & Wesson. He made a lot of positive changes at Smith & Wesson. He left for Ruger, where they were having some and continue to have some really big problems. Just a litany of tooling problems, QC problems. So hopefully Ruger's going to start back up on the upswing, but that's a big underlying problem. If you get a good revolver, it's a very frustrating market. So revolver speed loader technology essentially stopped in 1970 somewhere with the HKS speed loader. The SL variant, which is a quantum leap ahead of every other speed loader in the world, stopped being manufactured probably sometime shortly before I got into revolvers in 2016. I bought 4 SL variants. I think they were $75 a piece on eBay. Each cartridge is spring loaded individually. You just push it straight into the cylinder and it shoots all the cartridges into their respective chambers. Their utility patent has been dead, but one company in Japan makes a pretty garbage copy of this thing. I don't know why no one will pick this up and make a high quality version of this, or do some actual innovation, make a new revolver speed loader. That's incredibly frustrating to me. Just everybody assumes that revolver people don't care about running their guns to maximum possible effect. Holster fits are getting better. Certainly nowhere near what they are with, a Glock or a 365 or even a 1911, but it's certainly better.
So it sounds like I need to go get a Manhurin MR73.
I have a buddy who has one, and he's, I think February, he's going to drop a review on a revolver. I mean, it's already written. It's in there. I think it's coming out in February, his review. He's pretty happy with it.
I was joking because I can't afford that, but
I might go with a Korth if I were in that market, but, yeah.
Okay.
It's a frustrating space though. It's a, you don't need more than 5 rounds. And like, that's not why I buy a gun, right? Like I want to run it to, like, it is fun for me to go to the range and do, reloads and whatever, not just shoot 5 rounds and then be like, well, no one makes a speed loader for this gun. So I guess I'll just thumb 5 more cartridges into it. Like, that is not, even if it's functionally adequate, I get nothing out of that.
Yeah. So for me, my purposes of it really is a lot more around just learning different manual of arms, and there's competition divisions that I can't compete in right now because I don't have a revolver. So that would be the primary use. But maybe it means I do go do another 1911 first. All right. We're coming up on an hour, so time flies, man. All right. What have I not asked about?
What did you want me to I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. Optics. Optics.
I see. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, all right. So give me your take on optics.
My eyes aren't what they used to be. I used to be extremely proud of my accuracy potential with iron sights. And I just can't do the amazing things that I could. Even 5 years ago, my eyes still don't wear glasses. I can still, I still see well at night. I've not had a big degradation, but I have noticed that I am just not capable of the things that I was capable of with iron sights, 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. I still shoot better than most shooters, especially in law enforcement.
But that hesitation, I need to pull a follow-up question on that hesitation.
I don't mean to trash talk anybody. It's anyway, here or there. We can come back to it if you want. I have found that, so I threw a optic on my P365 XL, took it to a 5-day Tom's Given class. Like, I'm just going to dive into the deep end. And, that was really the big push that I needed. And then I realized, like, I am massively more accurate, especially at distance. It took me a little bit to get the comfort with presenting quickly, but that really just comes down to a really consistent index. If you're presenting out and the gun is at a slightly different angle, it's like holding a toilet paper tube out in front of you. If it's off just a little bit, you're not going to be able to see through it. And if your presentation is off just a little bit, you're not going to see the dot. And that's, I think, where a lot of people who have experience with iron sights get frustrated and have difficulty. But once you kind of get over that, man, these things are amazing. Like, you have much more vision of the target. You can be massively more precise. 25, 50 yards, you can be much more precise than you can with iron sights. The night sight question is not even a question now, because this, you have an illuminated dot in all conditions. The ability to target focuses.
And a short intermission here, because while we were talking, Justin's internet dropped out. It took a couple minutes to get it back. And then we just kind of continued talking. Actually, I have very similar experience. So this is my main kind of carry optics competition one, P10F, with the SRO on it. And my experience mirrors yours a lot, that being able to be target focused at distance makes a huge difference. And then the dot just helps me out. So like when I shoot a stage, 15, 20 yards, 3-4 inch circle, like the probability of that hit with here, much, much higher than with iron sights. But I have run into the same thing you said, which is, like, if it's from the draw, the time to that first shot, and especially the targets at like less than 10 yards, is just marginally slower. And I'm trying to figure out how much of that is my own muscle memory of how to sight picture with iron sights and the way it all feels to come out, than hunting for the dot, versus it's actually worse. I'm much more the former, that I think has more to do with just my background.
Yeah.
And what I have found works for me going to this one is being able to have the irons and the visible through the window seems to make a big difference for me, that I have at least that reference point that I can look for the irons like I would normally, but then the dot's there. It seems to make a big difference to me. Like if it's like my CZ, I can't see the irons at all through the optic.
Okay,
and that's why it slows me down just a little bit. Now it's probably a practice issue.
Yeah. So, I read Red Dot Mastery with, Gelhaus, Oxner, and I think there was a third author to that. Big takeaways, like when you're presenting out with irons, you have that entire press out to refine that sight picture, right? To get everything to line up. Just due to that small box that you have to look through here, you basically arrive at the end of your extension. And if it's not just right, you're not going to see the dot because it's, you're looking through a very small tube. And if it's off just a little bit, you're not going to see anything. And it's just, basically I found that if you just do, essentially 1 million repetitions, starting out here at full extension, breaking it just enough that I can no longer see the dot and then putting it back where I can see the dot, coming back to, high compressed ready and back out. And then from all the way from a draw, you'll get it down. The one thing I'm still not very good at is single-handed presentations. It's still like, I'm still pretty janky at that. But man, the accuracy potential I led our last SWAT team training, and the first thing we did was the 700 aggregate drill, the Humbler, which is 70 rounds at 25 yards on a B8 target scored as marked. So 700 potential points. It's very, it's fairly slow, but it's very accuracy oriented. I demonstrated everything. And until we got to the strong hand only stage, I didn't drop a single round out of the black circle at 25 yards, which, made me look amazing. But it's not really me. You just put the dot over it and don't move the gun. It's not, you're not blocking half the target with the sights. You're not trying to line up 3 different things. You're just looking at the target and superimposing the dot on it and making a good trigger press. It's, I'm absolutely sold. Everything I'm going to have, just about everything I run is going to have a dot on it, except like my backup gun. I'm sold.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm fully confident, just like red dots are like the minimum standard on rifles now, like very few people shoot iron sights anymore on rifles. Yeah. It's going to be the same way for pistols. Now, my working theory is that we will still see iterations of the best way to mount a dot. I think we're going to see probably the SIG's answer, like the M17 is probably among the better ones. And then you also have the non-reciprocating ones like the Lugo Alien. That also has a lot of merit. Like my Ruger Mark IV, 22, but like the dot is not mounted to anything that reciprocates.
Yeah.
That stability makes a big difference to me.
Well, I think the Acro and the Koa with their you don't just have 2 screws holding the optic in. I think that's, probably something in that direction is going to be a big improvement. And battery technology, right? These optics are bomb proof, they're waterproof, they're, drop from space proof, but the batteries are basically made to go in hearing aids and watches, right? They're not meant to take this battering that they get on a handgun. Yeah. I think that technology probably has some room to improve, but yeah, overall, I agree. It's, it's essentially going to be the EOTech aim point on a rifle situation in 10 more years. And even now you go to a class and it's pretty rare that you see someone just shooting irons. I mean, not rare. You still see a few people, but the majority of the class is shooting optics now.
I'll be that guy. All right. One more thing, just because I said I was going to come back to it. So I was watching an interview, I think it was with Daryl Boltke, and they were talking about revolvers, and he was talking about kind of the different training standards of, hey, when you tell people they've got 17 rounds of ammo in their gun, they tend to be more open with using it than if you said, hey, you've only got 6, 7, 8. Do you see a world, especially kind of in the law enforcement marksmanship training, where that might be true, where it's kind of like more reliance on more ammunition as marksmanship versus actually developing real solid skill?
No, maybe. But when law enforcement officers carried revolvers, the average shots fired by a law enforcement officer was 6, right? Get the gun between you and the bad guy and make noise as fast as you can until bad thing stops happening, right? Law enforcement is notoriously poorly trained. Everybody knows this now. It's not a secret. Going through the academy at my age and with my level of experience, I was pretty flabbergasted at some of the people who are like, yeah, I just have to get a passing score on the qual and then I'm good. They're not thinking ahead to the point where I may be laying on pavement, bleeding from multiple injuries, my hands covered in blood, and someone's swinging a shovel at my head trying to murder me on on the side of a highway. And that's what my gun is really for. People aren't thinking that way. It's in law enforcement. Some people are, some people certainly are. Some people are incredibly skilled. Some people seek outside training. Some people put a lot of emphasis on their firearms training, but across the board, I think I'm still surprised that a lot of law enforcement applicants have very little interest in firearms. It's just a tool. It's like, hey, here's your computer, here's your pens, here's your gun, here's your clipboard. There's not the emphasis that I feel like there should be, and that this is a life-saving tool that you will, if you ever have to use it, it will be to save your own life or that of a citizen somewhere. Mm-hmm. So as a result, I don't think the average cop is putting a lot of the cop who would, mag up 17 rounds as fast as they can is putting a lot of emphasis on either of those things. I think they're just stuffing 17 rounds in it because, that's how many go in there until it stops taking more. And I guess my point is I don't think there's even, it even rises to that level of like, oh, well, if I miss, I've got more rounds to shoot. It's like, no, this is just a heavy thing they make me carry. I don't think that level of thought's even being put into it. And, maybe when the gun comes out, the fact that more ammo is there may influence that more bullets come out. But, I paint a pretty bleak picture, but, you're not the only one. I mean, when I've talked to John Simpson about sniper training, he talks about how a lot law enforcement officers show up to sniper training and they try and hold a full-on bolt-action rifle like it's a pistol out in front of them, and that's not like there's just not that experience and exposure. And then I go back and I see some of the tests that you've run. I forgot which sheriff it was. It was California, Bakersfield PD, the old Bakersfield PD qual. Yeah,
yeah, and it's like that's actually like a pretty robust seeming test. So and that's what they had figured out how many decades ago. So, what happened in the middle? And I get it. There's training budgets go down. We over rely on new technology. I've seen the same thing, the military side of it, where it's like, hey, we spend X amount of money on marksmanship training. We introduce new feature, new red dot, ACOG, whatever, that will enhance marksmanship even further. But then you see a decrease in the budget for actual training because the new thing makes up the gap. So that you never actually, you never actually get anywhere.
I just listened to a podcast with Greg Ellifritz, and I'm trained with him a bunch. And he was he was a training officer for a law enforcement agency in Ohio for years. And he said he had like $150,000 budget. Every cop fired like 4,000 rounds a year and went to 1 or 2 classes a year. And I'm like, dude, that is amazing. Like, all we do is qualify once non-SWAT team. All they do is qualify once a year, 30 rounds. So they're shooting thousands of rounds per guy, going to classes and whatever. And he's like, then a new chief of police comes in, cuts the budget from $150,000 to like $20,000 overnight. So, the face of training completely changed. And it's not that our sheriff or our chief of police or whoever is disinterested in training, but they have to navigate a budget, which is just a reality of any organization. But yeah, I don't think more capacity is a bad thing. And I don't think it drives you necessarily to make bad decisions. I think we just don't really train people super well.
Okay.
To answer your original question.
Well, I would love to keep talking. We are an hour and 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
And it's so, Justin, it's been awesome talking to you again. We've got to do this more frequently. Where can people find you?
SwiftSilentDeadly.com. Also, shameless plug, check out Competent and Dangerous on Amazon.com. It's my latest book and I'm very proud of it.
And that's it. Thank you for listening to this interview. This has been one of the longer ones I posted in a very long time. And I got to say, I really enjoyed talking to Justin that much and kind of such a wide ranging array of subjects. But speaking of which, do come by the website, check out the review of his book, Competent and Dangerous. I posted it just a little bit earlier this week, just before dropping this episode of the Everyday Marksman podcast. And with that, that's it for me. Take care, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.